I'm Teisha Bader, and in the news, a special roundtable held at the White House on December the 7th, led by Doug Emhoff, with members of the administration sitting down with Jewish leaders from across the spectrum to talk about the rise in anti-Semitism and efforts to combat hate. Among those present, a Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Antisemitism at the U.S. State Department, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, and Deputy Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Antisemitism, Keyak. Before being appointed as deputy last November, Aaron served as Jewish Outreach Director during President Joe Biden's presidential campaign. He held senior roles advising members of Congress and the Obama administration. He served as the top Middle East advisor and communications director for Representatives Gerald Nadler and Steve Rothman. And Aaron serves as a term member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He joins us now from Washington. Aaron, thank you so much for being here on JBS.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So you were at the roundtable, you were a participant, and I'm sure you've been at numerous meetings and discussions about countering anti-Semitism over the years. But given the environment we are in today, and where things are at right now, I wanted to just ask if you can describe what the feel in the room was like. Was there a difference that you noticed as compared to other similar meetings, perhaps that you've had in years prior?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. You know, I'm a State Department official, an official in the Biden-Harris administration. I'm also a member of the Jewish community, and the type of conversations I have at my Shabbat table are very much like a lot of the conversations that the Jewish leaders were having at the roundtable, but also within their organizations and at their own Shabbat tables. When I was growing up, I, as a Jew in America, I never felt unsafe walking down the street. I would proudly wear my kippah and without fear that I was going to get attacked or punched in the face walking down the streets of Brooklyn. And that's just, unfortunately, the reality has changed. Now, as you know, the mandate of our office, headed by Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, is overseas in the State Department. With Doug Emhoff's leadership on this, along with Ambassador Rice and White House Jewish Liaison Shelley Greenspan, we were able to convene a conversation that crossed borders between domestic and international, because the line really is not that clear anymore. With social media and the spread of anti-Semitism online, what starts in the United States doesn't necessarily stay in the United States. You know, you can get radicalized abroad and then come and do your act of anti-Semitism here. So it's important that we take a whole of government approach, that all the various parts of government, all the various agencies are talking with each other. And what this roundtable was able to do is we were able to hear directly from the leaders of the community that is impacted from these Jewish leaders, and they gave us some great suggestions. We're going to take it to heart and figure out the best way forward.
Are any of those suggestions anything you can share at this point?
I think I'll let the Jewish leaders speak for themselves. Some of them have released statements and been quoted, but the overall message from us and from them is, you know, we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, and we have to call it out as we do and express our outrage. The Biden-Harris administration has been clear and consistent in condemning that hate, but we can't wait any longer because later it's going to be too late.
You mentioned Ambassador Lipstadt and the purpose of the office initially, or in its original idea, is to be that liaison to countries outside of the U.S. And I just wanted to read something she said, reported by the JTA. She said, "I can't go to these countries," meaning foreign countries, "and say, you have a problem. Now I have to say, we have a serious problem." And that's a really astonishing shift.
Yeah, I think when Congress created this office in 2004, there was a thought that anti-Semitism is a serious problem. Of course, it existed in the United States, but that this office really was outwardly focused. Use U.S. leadership on the international stage to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, which we do. But the tenor of the conversations are just different now. We bring a humbleness to our diplomacy and a genuine. Creating a genuine dialogue on how we are going to fix this problem together with our other countries, whether it's bilaterally or multilaterally. It's not, there is no one place where anti-Semitism exists. It exists everywhere. It happens every day. And every country has a problem when it comes to anti-Semitism. So when we're having this conversation with our diplomatic counterparts, there's no finger wagging. It's, we have this problem, how are we going to deal with it together? Like sort of like when we were having conversations about COVID, it's not that COVID respects any particular borders. This is an international problem that we have to fight together. And so too with anti-Semitism, it's a virus we all have to deal with.
That's such an interesting comparison. And I think actually Douglas Emhoff used the word epidemic to talk about the rise in anti-Semitism. And it's, the fact that he is Jewish, I feel really resonates from the words he has said, and seemingly he is taking this very personally. Is that what you gathered at this meeting? I mean, he seemed to be very, he said he really feels personally obligated to do more and speak out, and that he is absolutely committed to not just starting this conversation, but continuing this conversation as long as he has a platform to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the honor of working with him for a few years now, and he himself is a great Jewish leader and a great American leader. The impact he has on the Jewish leaders and the Jewish community when they're interacting with him is quite powerful. Seeing sort of the reflection of him in their faces and how important it is to be a proud Jew on the international stage as a spouse of the vice president. He's a powerful symbolic figure. And as we saw at the Roundtable, his convening power, the fact that, as he said, he's going to use this microphone as long as he has it, his clarity, the purpose he comes to this task with, it helps elevate the fight against this issue, and he's just invaluable in this role, this historic role, not just as the first male second gentleman, well, I guess the first second gentleman, but also as the first Jewish spouse of any president or vice president. I always thought it was quite powerful when we would send our secretaries of state who happen to be women overseas in countries where women were mistreated, and you wouldn't even see women in senior levels of government. Now we see their representation matters, and the second gentleman embodies that.
And I do think that personal side of it is truly significant, and makes it even more compelling, I'm sure, in a meeting such as you had, to hear him speak. And speaking, you mentioned your own Jewishness, of course, and your approaching being in that roundtable as a participant, also as deputy envoy, and as a Jewish person making their way in the world. And I think it's so interesting. I want to just read something William Daroff said about you, if you don't mind, when you were named to this office. Of course, CEO of the Conference of Presidents, Daroff said, "You are a person with superior ethics and values who lives Jewishly every day of his life and works to make the world a better place." How does that inform the work that you do? And is it just sort of like this marriage of just who you are and what you do? Or has it changed your way of thinking about yourself as a Jewish person in the world at all?
That was very kind of William to say. He is really one of the great Jewish leaders, not just in America, but internationally. We're privileged to have him as a partner government to to Jewish communal leader. Look, people ask me about this work a lot. And, you know, the idea of being in this position at this time with the head of our office, being who she is, to fight anti-Semitism when it's on unprecedented rise on behalf of the most powerful country on earth. I'm not sure there's much more someone like me could ask for. But what's important to understand is, of course, there's a Jewish communal aspect to it. It's also just a foreign policy priority of the United States of America to combat anti-Semitism worldwide. When we go to other countries and we're discussing the wide range of issues that our two countries deal with on the international stage, combating Jew hatred is one of those priorities. And so even if we're not able to convince a particular counterpart, or even if a government disagrees with our interpretation of what they're doing, we have to do better to convince them. But they have to understand that that's a problem with the United States of America too. You don't get your own interpretation of Jew hatred or of whitewashing anti-Semitism. Or if you take something like shechita, ritual slaughter, when you're not making it comfortable for Jews to exist in your country, especially if you look at some place like Europe, which has, because of their history, a special obligation to ensure that they allow for robust and comfortable Jewish life. You know, it's a foreign policy problem with our country when we're not on the same page there. So if obviously combating anti-Semitism because Jews need to feel safe, and you know, remembering what happened during the Shoah, that's enough. But on top of that, and on top of it being a U.S. Foreign policy priority, it's also fundamentally a bedrock of a stable society. Any government that allows for anti-Semitism, that tolerates anti-Semitism, is not going to be a healthy society for long. Because if you think about it, the conspiracy theory of anti-Semitism is that Jews control the financial sector, the banks, they control the media, they control the government, they're the puppet strings behind everything. And if that is your fundamental belief about your government, about the structure of finance in your country, about the media, you can't trust the media because it's controlled by Jews, that anti-Semitic conspiracy rots away at the healthiness of society. So it's something that we need to fight together to make Jews feel safe, but also to have a healthy governments that we can work with.
Absolutely. And of course, anti-Semitism goes hand in hand with other forms of prejudice and bigotry and hate, of course. And it's not perhaps always seen that way. It seems obvious that it is just another form of bigotry and hatred that has to be faced and combated, and you know, goes hand in hand with all these other forms of hate that we encounter. Can you talk a bit about your sense of what is behind, or what is underneath this rise in anti-Semitism? I know it's not easy to like point to one thing and say, this is what happened, but when you look at the issue and when you look at the rise, and when Ambassador Lipstadt looks at things, what are you seeing, if anything, as something you can point to, or issues that have pushed this up above the norm of late?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. It's anti-Semites feeling emboldened. It's the ability for information to be shared very quickly with very few barriers throughout the world. You know, it used to be if you wanted to acquire a book or a document that denied the Holocaust, let's say a couple decades ago, it'd get mailed to you in a plain envelope to a PO box. Nowadays, if you want to access Holocaust denial, it's just a mouse click away. You just type it in and it's right there for you. But there are other problems too. it's quite difficult to keep the anti-Semite from finding the information they're looking for in this day and age with the access to information we have through the internet. But at the very least, we can work with the social media companies to break down the highways of hate, right? You can start out looking for Anne Frank's diary. You can start out looking for the causes of World War II. But just a few algorithms, and all of a sudden you're being served anti-Semitic material. You're being served Holocaust denial. You started out looking to learn about history, looking to learn how it was to be a Jew during the Holocaust, and all of a sudden you end up at anti-Semitic material. Those are the types of things that social media companies need to address, and at least hold themselves up to their own standards and their own terms of service. It's very difficult for an actual motivated anti-Semite to prevent them from accessing that information, but you shouldn't start out looking to learn about history and then being served anti-Semitism. And as far as the interconnectedness of hate and not fighting hate in silos, it's also important to understand the anti-Semite might seek out to attack Jews, but it doesn't end with Jews. And same with the other forms of hate. The racist might not start by targeting Jews, but if you go into the anti-Semitic ideology, you then turn out as an anti-Semite. So it's something, there's an interconnectedness of this hate. Once you're able to dehumanize that one person in front of you, it quickly can spill over to others. So what we found here at the State Department, we work very closely with our colleagues who are charged with combating international religious bigotry and persecution, with racial equality and justice. It's something that we have to fight together.
Absolutely. And I want to just mention there is an initiative, I believe Senator Jackie Rosen began, and now over 125 lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, from both the House and the Senate, have signed on to a letter calling for a new or a somewhat different strategy to combat anti-Semitism, a whole of government strategy. Is this something that you and Ambassador Lipstadt are involved in, or is it, I assume this is going hand in hand with the roundtable that was held. Can you tell us anything about that?
Absolutely. First of all, there's no greater champion in the fight against anti-Semitism, and for our office specifically, than Senators Rosen and Senator Langford. So we work very closely with their offices. Without them, we would not be able to do the work that we do. And of course, we agree that we need a whole of government approach. And that is something that was raised during the roundtable. And in the not too distant future, we're hoping to come back with some more specifics. We were really there to listen. Of course, we gave Ambassador Lipstadt and Second Gentleman, Ambassador Rice and others gave opening remarks to show where we're at and to stand in solidarity. What we heard from the Jewish leaders around the table were some very specific items. Many of them referenced the Rosen-Langford letter. And we're hoping to come together soon and figure out the best path forward, because we have to do more. The Biden-Harris administration and Joe Biden himself have been outspoken in condemning anti-Semitism. It was the reason why Joe Biden ended up running for president in the end, after hearing the neo-Nazis chant the Jews will not replace us, carrying tiki torches in 2017. It's fundamental to who he is. It's also fundamental to who Secretary Blinken is, and to his family history. And of course, as far as our office is concerned, Ambassador Lipstadt gets us in our gut, or in our kishkas.
Well, Aaron, thank you and Ambassador Lipstadt truly for the work you do on a daily basis. It is certainly very challenging in these times, and we appreciate it deeply. And thank you so much for coming on JBS and talking to us about the roundtable. We hope to have you back on to perhaps talk about what the next steps will be.
Thank you for the invite, and I hope to be back soon.
Thank you so much. Aaron Keyak is Deputy Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Antisemitism at the U.S. State Department. We thank him so much for his time here today on JBS. And thank you, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, managing director, Dara Golub, technical manager, Michael Paley, transmissions manager, John McDevitt, to our producer, Carol Lilienthal, and executive producer, Mark S. Golub. And thank you for watching In the News.